Hey guys, this video aims to show how I clean and refresh my water cooling hardware, basically covering the GPU and CPU water blocks, D5 and DDC pumps, radiators, fittings, tubes, reservoirs, and distros all in one video. So let's dive in starting with water blocks. Take for example this EK Vector 2 unit made for the 4090 FE. I recently used this in a Fantex NV7 build and purposely left it uncleaned so I could make this video. I even left it a few weeks to partially dry inside and see if I could get it as yucky as possible. I did use the EK Scarlet Red Solid Premix, as opaque coolants have the tendency to require more frequent maintenance compared to clear and transparent coolants. Thicker the coolant, the more likely they are to clog up over time if left unmaintained. The first step is to take apart the block and put your actual graphics card PCB aside, along with anything you shouldn't be getting wet, like the RGB strip here. Take off any thermal pads you were using and clean off the thermal paste on the cold plate. Now the teardown and assembly will of course vary for different hardware brands and models. Please refer to your specific hardware's instruction manual if needed. Typically, water blocks will have some combination of copper, nickel, acrylic, aluminum, stainless steel, acetal, or plastic parts. Double check your manufacturer's hardware description to know what you're dealing with, so you don't use the wrong chemicals on certain materials. For example, do not use alcohol on acrylic or acetal, otherwise you will damage it. The easiest part to clean is going to be this acetal terminal. Typically with acetal and acrylic parts, I just wash in dishwasher soap and water with a tube cleaner. Rinse, dry, and done. Next up will be the cold plate that is machined from copper but nickel plated. There's also a stainless steel bridge plate and a plexi insert in the cold plate, which all of these could be washed with soap and water as well. I like to use a toothbrush to scrub out any residuals, especially between the fins. Now, sometimes your water block will get discoloration over time just from the coolant staining it. So even after washing with soap and drying it off, it typically won't be as shiny, and that's alright because it's already cleaned. However, if you want to take a step further and restore it close to new, I use a metal polisher, rub and shine it, wipe it down, and it looks really good. And yes, I will have links in my description for this. You can even use a toothbrush with the polish in between the fins too. I've used this to polish certain parts on my past builds, but I never thought about applying it to water blocks. Huge thanks to my friend Stuart from GGF for showing me this, by the way. Now the cold plate top cover is cast acrylic, so you can also wash it with soap and water. Really simple. Crazy thing about the acrylic is you can also use the metal polisher to shine it up too. Same with the stainless steel bridge plate. Then I wash the O-rings in soap and water as well with my hands and really just try to rub it between my fingers along the entire ring itself. The passive backplate for this water block is anodized aluminum. Also, do not use alcohol on this because it can ruin the anodizing surface. Passive backplates typically don't need cleaning as much as the rest of the water block itself. Basically just gets dusty, so you can just wipe it off. Active backplates like on this other EK4090 FE block, on the other hand, would just be like cleaning two cold plates. Pretty straightforward by repeating the previous steps. Then just reassemble your water block and you're done. A CPU block also follows the same principles as cleaning the GPU block, but will typically be much faster and easier since you don't have thermal pads to deal with and tearing out a sandwiched PCB. Next segment is cleaning your fittings. For your general hardline and soft tube fittings, just take off the collars as well as the O-rings if the O-rings can be taken out conveniently. For example, what I mean is, let's take a look at the Corsair hardline fittings and EK's hardline fittings here. These two designs have a total of 3 O-rings, which 2 of them can easily be removed. The O-ring where the G-quarter threads are at the bottom, as well as the topmost one that seals under the collar. The third O-ring is situated inside the fitting, which is less convenient to take out and requires some sort of tweezers to pick at. I actually ignore this inside one and just clean the 2 outer ones I can remove. In fact, most of the time, I don't even remove the one that's based at the G-quarter threads because this one is already pretty loose and a simple dunk and shake with a good rinse is sufficient. O-rings are pretty universal for every component. Just wash them with a good finger rub under soap and water like I explained in the previous water block segment. Some fittings like these barbed fittings for soft tubing only have the O-ring under the G-quarter threaded side and are less complex, pretty easy to clean. Then you have a whole bunch of different kinds of rotary and extension fittings which typically may or may not have removable collars. Same principles apply. In general, if you can take it apart conveniently, go for it, and just wash them is the best way I can say it because it's really not that hard. For the most part, if you just dunk all your fittings underwater and give it a good gentle shake with soap, I will say about 90% of the time they are pretty clean already, even if you don't take them apart. Honestly, the only time I think it's worth disassembling for a thorough scrub is if you left your PC loop running for a long time and you know you've got a lot of residual buildup, then yeah, definitely take your time to clean them right. Up next are radiators. The first thing I do is run them under my sink with tap water and let the flow go through the inlet and outlet ports like so. You'll know it's clean when you stop seeing the color of your coolant and everything is clear coming out of the other end. Now, the thing with radiators is that you can't really get inside to scrub out residuals that may have built up. Tap water typically always has minerals and deposits in it where, when you leave it to dry, it will leave these residuals behind. So what I recommend is after flooding it with tap water, do a final run with distilled water to flush out the tap water. At this point, you can just leave it to dry and you're done. Another method you can use to flush out unwanted residuals and particles in any of your components, whether it be water blocks, pumps and reservoirs, and radiators, is using a fuel filter for cars. Basically, just connect it with soft tubing like the way I have shown here. The flow of water goes into the filter inlet where it will catch all the particles and pass through the filter outlet while running through the loop. Running this for about 15 to 20 minutes with the pump at full 100% RPM is plenty enough. When you buy a filter like this, just make sure the inlets have the same outer diameter as the inner diameter of your soft tube, so it actually fits and doesn't leak. I myself here am using 3/8 inch for the matching diameters. Usually I only do this with radiators because I can already take apart water blocks and manually clean by hand as explained in the earlier segment. Now tubes. These are really easy. Just run them under soapy water and use a tube cleaner to scrub. Run them under water again, preferably distilled, then I just wipe down the outside and let the inside dry on its own. The last segment is going to be pumps, reservoirs, and distroplates, typically because they are used together in the same combo unit. I'll start with distroplates, because usually they are just sandwiched acrylic pieces held in by screws and O-rings sealed. Same way I disassemble my GPU water blocks, except you don't have to deal with thermal pads, thermal paste, and PCBs. You can just wash the acrylic under soap and water with a good scrub, wash the O-rings, wipe it down and let it dry and reassemble. That's it. Now pumps. I have a standalone DDC pump on hand here, and what I do is I just take out the spherical motor that is just magnetically sitting in the pump housing. Rinse the motor under tap or distilled water and wipe it down. The base of the housing I wipe down with a water damp cloth or paper towel, but do not run it under flowing water because it does have a PCB attached to it, so keep this dry. Place the motor back in and you're done. This is also the same with D5 pumps. It's pretty much got the same mechanism. Now reservoirs. Standalone reservoirs are typically similar to distroplates. They are just acrylic pieces. Some are sandwiched held in by screws like the EK FLT flat res, and some are cylindrical design like the EK Kinetic. Clean acrylic using the same methods I explained in the previous segments. Now, needless to say, some reservoirs are in combination with pumps. Disassemble the pump and clean these as explained in the earlier segment. To wrap this up, this is just how I clean my hardware. I don't know if other people do it slightly differently, but I'm pretty confident that my methods are considered normal. Also keep in mind there are several other brands and hardware that I didn't use in this video simply because I don't have everything. So hopefully you can take what you learned here and apply the principles to other similar hardware not shown. Thanks for watching.